Hello everyone, James Williams, Director of Programs with MEF again. If you haven't joined us yet today, a very warm welcome to what is ultimately the last main session of the day, namely the jury. And thank you indeed everyone for coming along today to our Personal Data and Digital Identity Day. If you haven't learned anything today, then you must be a supreme industry expert, because there's been a ton of great insight. And for me, the most important thing is the practical application. So everyone was talking about real life solutions today and not vaporware. Now we're going to be ending the day on a bit of a lighter note, but there are undertones of seriousness in the subject matter being covered. And the jury, it's a very simple premise. We have our jurors, essentially our contestants. Think Eurovision for mobile. And there are 5 of them today. We're going to be bringing them on stage, and they have 3 questions to answer. Each contestant, each juror, gets 2 minutes, a maximum of 2 minutes to answer the question. If they're going to roll over the 2 minutes, I will cut them off. I'm not going to be nice and let them run over at all. But if they want to take less than 2 minutes, absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. And you, the audience, get to vote. So after every question, after every juror has answered a question, you will have 60 seconds in a poll to choose the best speaker of that question. And at the end, I will tot up all the points, Eurovision style. And today, I think with 4 UK-based contestants, I can guarantee there will be at least 1 point for the UK, unlike the real Eurovision. So without further ado, may I welcome Pat Flynn to the show. Pat, you're on mute. You're doing my usual thing. There we go.
How you doing?
Welcome. Ireland usually does very well in Eurovision, so.
Not for a while, James. Not for a while.
No, I don't know. I don't know how they did on Saturday, but there we are.
Graham Norton is what we have in Eurovision.
Anyway, welcome, Pat. Pat is the co-founder, head of business development for Nettzer, digital first selling, digital onboarding. Welcome. Thank you for joining. And next up, we have Ellie Katz, the founder and CEO of XConnect. Ellie.
Thank you. Morning.
Thanks for being with us. We kept you waiting, but you're here now.
Looking forward.
You absolutely are. Looking forward to have you here. And yeah, thank you for joining. And it was great having Tim on an earlier session of mine as well. You're Tim Ward. Next up, we have the CEO of TMT Analysis, John Wilkinson.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Nice
John, something's changed since I last saw you.
Yes. I forgot I was on this afternoon. Otherwise,
don't worry.
Clean shaven.
You look absolutely fine, so good to have you. So you're the co-founder and CEO of TMT Analysis. And indeed, we had a colleague of yours, Matthias Berklund, on another of my sessions, the same as Tim from XConnect. So welcome. And next up, we have Dean Zwarts.
Good day, James.
Dean, nice to have you with us. South African, but you're in the Netherlands at the moment, so adding a bit of international flavour here for us. And you are the Director of Business Development, Digital Business Units with IDEMIA, and likewise, a colleague of yours, Pavlina, was on an earlier session.
That's correct, and hopefully I can give some European flair to the UK participants.
Go for it. Looking forward. And to give a truly European flair as well, we have Christoforos Papachristou. Welcome, Christoforos.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all.
I'm Christoforos.
UK and Europe.
Yeah, you're right, from Greece, but you're over here in the UK now. You're surviving the weather. Yeah.
Bad decision to come at that point with all this weather.
I know. But welcome. So, Christoforos, you're a strategic account manager with CENSUS. The full name is CENSUS SA or CENSUS Labs. So all of you are firmly in this personal data and digital identity space. So you are all perfectly placed. Now, I have 3 questions for you, And the first one is actually related to a session I just ran. And that's all about SMS and 2FA. And my statement, SMS should never be used for 2FA. And the idea is you can put the pitch down go in whichever direction you want, and you have a maximum of 2 minutes to do that. You can see the ticker running under there with the question. Now, you can see I'm highly organized, and I've just got some random post-it notes here. So literally, I don't know. Oh, Ellie, you're up. And literally, your 2 minutes starts now. Go for it.
Thank you very much. And first of all, may the best man win. Or if the best man does not win, maybe we'll have a fun time anyway.
You are. Go for it.
So I think it's important to highlight very briefly that the first statement is that 2FA is not going away. The basic ability of the percentage of people using unique passwords is maximum 1/3. So that's a clear driver for you need something new beyond a basic password methodology. Number two, from our own analysis and from Mobile Squared, roughly about 1/3 of all SMS traffic today we see as being kind of driven by the 2FA side of life. So that's a clear statement of that's the way it's going forward. I'll use the metric of my mother-in-law, the famous metric of the mother-in-law, who's suddenly realized that without 2FA on her WhatsApp, there will be a basic failing in an ability to be hacked. So once it's reached the mother-in-law level, that's clearly something that's going forward. Finally, the clear statistic is of all 2FA that we have today, 72% today is done via SMS. By far the leading component, and that's for one reason, because it is the most ubiquitous that we have. If you compare it to the Authenticator, Google Authenticator has 500 million downloads. So that's nothing compared to the 5 billion on the SMS side. So it is the most ubiquitous. It's absolutely going in only one direction, and this is of massive benefit to the industry and consumers.
Perfect. Spot on. That was 1:40. Well done, sir. Well done. So next up, James's Funhouse. Dean. Your 2 minutes starts 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Great. Thank you very much. So during COVID, I picked up some new skills. Among those have been baking with my 9-year-old daughter. So I'm no Nigella Lawson, but I'd like to use this as the analogy for two-factor authentication with SMS. So when we look at SMS for 2FA, I'd say we have to look at the view of a mille folies. For those of you who don't know what a mille folies is, it's an amazing cake with all these different levels and layers. And as the name states, it's 1,000 leaves in French. So if we look at this cake and we look at SMS, you cannot look at each layer independently or individually. They don't seem like much. They don't really have much character. But when you put it together in these multiple layers, it becomes a masterpiece. And I believe SMS is, of my view, a key play in two-factor authentication. It needs to be treated in the same context. On its own, it has its pros and cons. Of course, it is better than usernames and passwords. You only have to go to have I been pwned, and there are 11 billion accounts that have been compromised. So SMS is much better than usernames and passwords. However, SMS on its own is not ideal, as there's many measures that have to go into account in terms of checking and validating the communications, statuses of things like SIM swaps, for instance, where man-in-the-middle of attacks have occurred. So there's always the light side and the darker, crispier side to technologies, but they all play their key role. So we have to consider things like fallbacks. What if my phone is dead or stolen and I still need access to an urgent service? I can't receive an SMS. We as technology vendors and providers have an obligation to create these layers of convenience and security across a variety of technologies, such as knowledge-based questions or biometric authentication. So in my humble opinion, to make a masterpiece mille folie, you cannot rely on one layer alone, and SMS has a role to play, and as such, should be used as two-factor authentication.
Mute.
Mute. That's me this time. I was telling Pat off, but that's twice. I've done it on day one already. You were 2 seconds over, Dean, but I let you off, obviously. I was on mute anyway, so you could have gone on. But there we go. And next up, we go to our Greek British contestant, Christoforos. Go for it.
So I'm coming from a security background, so I'll have a little bit of a different approach. For starters, using SMS two-factor authentication solution is still more secure than having no two-factor authentication or username and password. First of all, the SMS two-factor authentication is still alive and thriving, partly because of the SMS's standard feature of the most mobile plans from every mobile operator all over the world. Secondly, the SMS code are easy and convenient. There is no fussing with downloading an app, scan a QR code, and might be the only option if you don't have a smartphone. It's also if someone's trying to break into your account, the two-factor authentication message on your phone can warn you that something is going on and you need to investigate. However, the SMS authentication is the most unsecure from the multi-factor authentication options. So back in 2016, the NIST has issued a recommendation to replace it with other authentication methods. The SMS authentication is very dependent on the device. So if your phone gets lost or your SIM card gets broken, you may not be able to access your account. Apart from that, SMS relies on the signature system 711 protocol, which was developed in 1975. So clearly it's an outdated method with a lot of vulnerabilities. So the easiness of exploitation highly depends on the carrier's process and the policies per country. As a number of infamous data breach scandals has shown over the last couple of years, breaking into an SMS protected account is not that hard for an average crew. So you can do that through SIM card duplication, where an attacker can try to impersonate the victim and convince the mobile service provider to issue another card. It can be through SIM rerouting or hijacking, with similar method duplication, but much simpler. The attacker again impersonates you and requests your telecom service provider to activate your number onto the SIM card. It can be through malware attacks, phishing attacks, resetting two-factor authentication options. The important note is to always do the right security assessments and be aware of the risk posture. It is very important to factor in your threat model.
Thank you, Christoforos. Excellent. Your 2 minutes is up. You see, I'm harsh when I'm not on mute. Dean, you were lucky. Christoforos, nice answer. Thank you very much. Next up, we're going to go to Pat, over the waters with you, sir. Go for it.
Yeah, well, for some fun, I was thinking what I was going to do is I have 3 glasses here. I have a full glass, I have a half full glass, which I've been drinking out of, and I have an almost empty glass, right? So if you think about two-factor authentication, is if you think about the value chain, there's the customer, there's the enterprise who want to deal with the customer, there's the mobile operator, and in the middle, there's the CPaaS, ID aggregators, MVNOs. There's a consortium of what you might call differentiated companies who are interested in two-factor authentication. If you go down that value chain, the customer needs more education. The enterprises want solid identification. I think the likes of CPaaS and MVNOs are working hard on it. And mobile operator, I think, is the weak link. So while we have to use SMS two-factor authentication, it's the most practical solution. I have to say, I have to give mobile operators a glass half full for their. We need to do some more work to get everything right. And this is something I know a little bit from my background, James, you might know. So glass half full, but we still have to do it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I think you know who you are now. John, go for it. 2 minutes starts. Now, I'll even use my stopwatch. You know, I forgot even to look at the time. You were lucky, Pat. I forgot even to look at the time. Out of control after today, but off we go. Go for it, John.
I'll probably save you half a minute, James, because everyone else's answers were so good. I'm tempted to vote for some of them. Couple of points for me. I think, just to be direct, I would say nonsense is the answer to the question. I think very clearly there's very clear use cases. The most obvious use case for me at the moment is around customer onboarding. So, if a customer's coming to an e-commerce site or is trying to be onboarded for the first time, and that site wants to know that the number is real, they want to know that the user that's typing in the information has control of that number, then SMS is obviously a very good two-factor authentication mechanism for that. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. About the fraud risks and the hijacking and the port fraud, messaging forwarding, I think we are seeing a lot of progress in Pat's point about the glass being half full. The networks are really doing a better job now. They're rolling out platforms for the interrogation of of IMSI to number. They're rolling out a lot of APIs for KYC, which can obviously be used at that same instance to check that the number is in the control of the user, that it's not been forwarded, that it's not been hijacked. You can see the last date of the SIM change. So I think there's a lot you can do with security, and the use cases are kind of obvious and everyone understands them, and it's clearly not going anywhere.
Fantastic, John. Indeed, you bought us half a minute there. Very nice. Thank you. So, audience, you will see in your poll tab what you can do, and you now have 60 seconds to vote. Thank you. Thank you. The time for voting is up. I'm going to have the answer flashed to me here using a very well-known chat app. I am waiting. Oh, something has arrived. Right, so in true Eurovision style, we don't have 12 points because there are 5 of you. So 1 point, actually, yes, 1 point goes to 2 of you. That is Ellie Katz and Christoforos Papachristou. And then we have next up, well, I would have to go for then the next level up would be 3 points each. That would be Pat Flynn and Dean Zwarts. And just by a whisker, John Wilkinson. You didn't think you'd do it. The way you at least like, no,
I think I've got my family dialed in.
and he's not joking. So there we go. Actually, turn the computer around. It's like he's actually forced the rest of his office to come in. Doesn't matter. You got it. It's not how you do it. It's the result that counts. So congratulations. Can we have the next question, please, on the ticker? Thank you. Question 2. Is the personal data and identity community, that's you lot, really doing everything it can to deliver genuine consumer trust? By the way, that consumer trust thing is a panel discussion I've got tomorrow as well, with some other well-known industry persona. So first up, I'm actually going to go for Dean on this one. So your 2 minutes, and I'm actually looking at the clock, starts now.
Great, thanks, James. So to keep to my previous analogy of in the kitchen, we have to look at the process of how things are made and the processes that support it. So, how do these world-renowned chefs create gastronomy to tickle the senses? Well, it all starts with having the right tools for the job. So when we look to ask the question, is the community really doing everything it can to deliver genuine consumer trust? Well, it's a best fit answer. To be successful in this kitchen as a community, we need the right tools. We need the strong legislative support to drive legal frameworks to ensure competitiveness, interoperability, and consistency for the consumer. We need technical and operational frameworks to ensure security by design is executed. And in various markets, they are either driven from a government perspective, multi-industry perspective, siloed industry point of view, or innovators looking to break the mold. However, these frameworks create the rails for acceptance. We then have to look at the execution upon these frameworks, the technology requirements to support it. We then also have to, which could leverage everything from identity at the core, identity on the edge, full self-sovereign identity, and various use cases that support those. So in summary, to make a masterpiece in this kitchen, I believe that as a community, we are doing very well, driving a strong focus on using all the tools available to us in the right areas to build the necessary trust. And this has been proven with ID initiatives globally across various industries. So I do believe as an industry, we are creating the consumer trust, but will always evolve, and our job will never be done. And so as the tasks become more complex, the need to improve our tools in the kitchen would also be a necessity.
Dean, thank you very much. Just a very quick one, and I'm going off-piste here, but out of 10, how would you rate the industry as a whole?
Based on the frameworks and where we are today, and provided the legislation to support it, we're probably at an 8 out of 10. Some are more mature than others, but an 8 out of 10 would be a fair reflection.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Thank you very much. Next up, I'm going to go. Do you know what? You were last, John, but I'm going to put you here now. Go for it, John. 2 minutes now.
Okay. So are we doing enough as an industry? No. I'd take a more aggressive stance than Dean. I think in some respects we are. So, if you're looking to raise money for a digital identity business at the moment, if you look at some of the money that's getting raised in the US, then it's huge amounts. So the markets are kind of accepting there needs to be solutions. And there's smart companies like IDEMIA and lots of others who are raising a lot of money and really going at this problem in a serious way. So that's a good thing. And the market's trying to deal with it. But I think it'd be very tricky to look at the state of the internet and digital identity in general and say that it was good. It's not. There's a lot of really fundamental problems in digital identity, which is why there's so many solutions being created to try and crack it, but we haven't cracked it, and we're not really even very close to cracking it. I think some of the biggest drivers of it and the things that would make the sea change difference would be the big guys, the social networks, looking at the scam accounts, false accounts, AKAs, aliases. There's a whole generation out there that's been accustomed to people pretending to be other people on the internet. And it's impossible to look at that and all the associated problems with it around fraud and abuse and think that that is managed well and done well. So I think that if those kind of companies could take a stronger lead, that would be really important. I think the mobile networks aren't doing such a terrible job. They could do a better job still, but they're actually trying quite hard. I think it's the social networking companies who could take a lead and really make a statement, and that would help younger generations coming through to accept that digital identity is a thing that needs to be controlled carefully, well, with rich products, and that would be enormously helpful. So I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
Okay, thank you very much. Bang on time, and you included that extra bonus answer within there, just in there. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Next up, I'm going to go for Ellie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if we look at it from a macro perspective on a country level basis, that's a kind of the starting point. Look at the national legislation. So clearly what's happened in the EU with the introduction of GDPR has definitely kind of helped lay a foundation of success and the beginning of restoring of trust. And the good news is that we're seeing that kind of being rolled out across other nation states and across other states in the USA. So California code recently enhanced, various other states going down the same path. If we look on a country basis, you have India, Brazil, Japan, Australia. So that kind of macro movement towards restoring the foundations of trust at a national legislation level is certainly going in the right direction. If we look at it now, not nationally, but actually as an industry, then no better than to look at our hosts, right? Look at what the MEF has done to help enable, build, and regain trust in the industry. So through its efforts of the code of conduct, trust in the enterprise messaging side, all of these are additional foundations that will help deliver ultimately what is essential for the thing. But the sad point is, if we look at the number of members of MEF members who picked up on that code of conduct, we're looking at about 30 out of 130. If you want to have a clear score, use that as the score. We as an industry have got to get to that 100% level. If we as an industry are laying down these foundations then we must deliver on that successfully. And just to finish off, we can't get to the stage whereby what's happening in general voice telecoms, Ofcom have to make announcements that you cannot trust as a consumer, you cannot trust the CLI on your phone when you're getting calls. We cannot reach that stage, because once you reach that stage, you've lost that entire foundation of trust. So we have to do whatever we can. Sender ID management, again, another MEF initiative, only with tens of enterprises. We need to get that to hundreds or thousands of enterprises.
Thank you, Ali. Bang on. So first of all, I was thinking if MEF was voting, I would give you a brownie point for mentioning MEF. But then actually I'd deduct that point, because yes, we do have a total of about 130 members, but only 80 are members of the Future of Messaging program. So it's about just over 30 of the 80. It's not as bad as you said. Could be better, but not as bad as you said. Thank you, Ellie. Next up, we're going to have Christoforos. Come on. Yeah, go for it. Your 2 minutes. Start now.
Yeah, I agree with John, and I think that we are not doing enough. I'll try to put myself in the shoes of the consumer. So in general, the average consumer understanding of privacy and data protection is very low. There is a gap between what consumers want, like openness, knowledge about the use of their data, and what the business is doing. The community is divided to two competing groups, in my opinion, privacy advocates and tech giants, that instead of working together to establish a simplified baseline for the average consumer, they work on corner cases that don't affect necessarily the masses. So consumers are becoming increasingly intentional about what type of data they share and with whom. So the average user tends to feel safe when it comes to core data, like content of private conversations, but not when it comes to how information related to them is used, like search terms, social media, metadata, etc. So the lack of trust is understandable, given the recent history of high-profile consumer data breaches. And the scale of consumer data exposed in the most catastrophic breaches is staggering. Tech companies are complicating the privacy T's and C's that users need to accept, and are hiding information behind small letters and confusing wording. So it's clear that gaining and keeping customer trust by protecting their data is vital to the competitiveness of a business and its ongoing success. But how companies can achieve that? Well, 4 main ways. Establish a reputation for protecting customer data and privacy. Ensure you handle privacy by design. Proactively transparent.
That's off.
It's a culture of privacy.
Oh, he tried to get those extra words in at the end.
Always sitting.
Our teacher could take his exam paper away. We just got 2 of them, so there we go. Next, time management, time management, and last but by no means least, again, back over the waters to Pat. Go for it. So your 2 minutes starts. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. Well, I sold my glasses of milk here, but I've been a little more lenient on this than some of my colleagues. In the last year, we've had COVID. There's been a huge move online. There's been people working from home who never thought they would work from home. And there's been a consequent increase in scams, as we're all aware. And I think where we're at is the question is, where would you rate the industry? I think the industry's at an immature phase in this sense. There's a lot of ID systems being promoted by governments, by banks who are naturally somewhat in the lead in this space. A lot of private companies and even mobile operators are now coming in as players with platforms and so on. So I think we're at a boiling of ideas, some of which will wither away, some of which will be winners, and some of which will be tuned for particular markets. So for example, we're working on onboarding customers for telcos, MVNOs and so on. So you're seeing the classic capitalism of focus into niches and so on. And I'm not sure there will be an overall winner. But as regards where the industry is, I see a lot of energy, I see a lot of investment. And on that basis, it's glass full.
Thank you, Pat. And I apologize. No one caught me out. Christoforos, you looked a bit puzzled. And you're correct. I cut you off after 1 minute 30. It's my man maths. I failed. You actually have another 30 seconds. So what were the last 2 out of the 4? And what's your rating out of 10 for the industry? I do apologize, sir. And viewers, please don't hold that against him. Hold it against me.
Well, I was trying to talk a lot. I have a great reputation to keep. The other two were to be proactively transparent and establish a culture of data privacy ethics within the organization. From my point of view, I'm not as positive as the previous speakers. I believe that I would give a score of around 6 for the industry.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that is everyone. I have covered everyone. That was a mistake I made last time by missing one poor person out, but at least I covered you all. So audience, you have 60 seconds to vote. And likewise before, it's in the poll. Go for it. And we're back. I'm waiting for the results. Jesse, send them through. Wowzers. So, not that I'm surprised. Obviously, I didn't mean it like that. But, oops. But with over 1/3 of the audience votes, Christoforos. I'm actually going the other way around now. Christoforos. Oh, hang on. Used to do that. 5 points. Well done, sir. I'm switching things up. I'm going with the winner first. Absolutely amazing. Well done. And then with 4 points, Mr. Wilkinson, you did say you were going to tell your mum not to vote to give the others a chance, and you did. So thank you very much for that. And then, it's my mess here. And then 3 points apiece. It's going to be Mr. Flynn and Mr. Katz and Dean. 1 point this time, sir. There we go. Thank you very much. And now we are in the home straight. Can we have on the ticker, please, our final question, question 3. There we go. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly? Read GDPR of how we, as an industry, operate. And for this one, I'm going to actually start with you, Pat. Go for it. Your 2 minute starts now.
Yeah, well, good, bad, and ugly reminds me of a very famous podcast, James. So thanks for the promotion.
I wonder who was a guest on that as well.
Yeah. So listen, there's a lot of good news here, but there is a big fly in the ointment, I think. GDPR has set a standard that, whether it's perfect or not, is actually a standard. And it's also a standard that's been seen as a target by a lot of other countries. And in fact, if you go to countries without GDPR, they generally ask you, do you meet GDPR standards? So it's set a legal framework for privacy. It's focused on the user, and it's also actually working since the last 2 or 3 years. So I'd give that quite a high mark. However, that's the good part. The bad part really is it's not really clear exactly what it is every time, and there's different interpretations of it. But to be honest, the ugly part is there are certain industries that depend on gathering customer data who are, let's say, less than honest with what they do with the data. And on that basis, I'm afraid I'm going to have a glass nearly empty for certain people who are skirting around GDPR when it's not really backing it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pat. Next up, can we please have Ellie? And your 2 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to play a little track. Okay. over the little track. For any of those who remember the film, that is, if you're old enough to remember the film. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. So number one, the good side is, so one of the key aspects where GDPR kind of impacts in our industry, specifically from an M&O perspective, is looking at unrestricted HLR access. Because this is a place where your information about whether are you roaming, are you not roaming, which clearly is a big GDPR no-no, is something that until recently has been entirely open access from any M&O. So if we measure that one statistic, we reckon about 50% today of all M&Os have implemented some form of firewall, which gives some sort of restricted access, and as well as an increasing number of them are beginning to offer kind of structured APIs that deliver this in a GDPR compliant manner. So from that perspective, kind of halfway there, and I think that's the good side. The bad side is, yes, you might well have GDPR under control, but if your basic information security and your company is open like a sieve, then you haven't gained anything. And the number of companies that, let's say, have done ISO 27001, which is the gold standard on an international basis of information security, is still very low, even in our industry. So something like ISO 27001 is essential. I know we've been through that process, years and thousands of hours of work, but that is a clear basis to get to deliver that next statement. And finally, the ugly side, one line, SIM farms. SIM farms, as ugly as hell, introducing complete unaccountability, and that is going to be the kind of the linchpin of the industry. So that's the ugly side. That's my little summary.
Thank you, Ellie. Yeah, indeed, SIM farms, super difficult to get rid of, super difficult. Okay, next up, I'm going with Dean, please. Your 2 minute starts now. Thank you.
Thanks, James. So taking in view of the previous theme of looking at the successes and the failures, or the successes and the difficulties that we encounter. And with the right tools, as mentioned, we can achieve success. And GDPR is one of those very important tools. So if we give an honest view of GDPR and finding the right balance between security and data privacy, there's this constant notion of risk, impacts, proportionality, legitimacy when dealing with personal data. Although I'm going to do a glass half full view of GDPR. If we have a look at GDPR and how it's made a huge impact and difference in terms of consumers by providing these comprehensive standards, globally, various markets are looking at GDPR and adapting the approach to tougher privacy and consumer data protection, while putting the consumer's data at the heart of their own information. Consumers have this constant view of how their data is being collected, stored, how it's being used, how it's being destroyed. Consumers have become educated and have become wiser in their approach and have a level of empowerment of what organizations can and can't do with their data. This has really stopped previous exploitations by putting control back in the consumer's hands. And GDPR risk of fines have been a warning shot to those who are not taking the necessary steps to the integrity and compliance requirements. Which means we have to look at the extra measures organizations have taken to fulfill this compliance. Yes, it's hampered customer experience in cases, or even created new levels of education required. However, these are minor points in terms of the additional trust that is being built with the consumers. So by providing this awareness and promoting these best practice principles, we're now developing an ecosystem of transparency and trust. So I believe as an industry, we're taking the right steps in the right direction and are creating the necessary levels of trust needed to create that loyalty with our customers. But there's still a lot of work to be done for full adoption. So in my view, by empowering the customer, we complement our own customers for a more secure world. And I believe there is still
game over, Dean.
Thank you.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, very nice. Thank you. And next up now, who shall I choose? I'm going to go for John. John, go for it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've got two goods, a bad, and an ugly. So the two goods are great thing, as everyone's described. Gives users some confidence, creates an infrastructure that we can all begin to understand and use. So in general, it's obviously very positive. Second good, I would say, recently is I've been working on some contracts recently for some very large MNOs, where their contract appears to say we're a data controller, an independent data controller, and you will follow the law regards to GDPR, whether you're a processor or a sub-processor. And that's all it says. And that seems to me a rather wonderful state of affairs, which, comparing to the bad, was a couple of years ago, where there was lawyers on both ends of the contracts trying to understand every single data flow and every single cascade and appropriate nature of GDPR for every single circumstance that occurred. And it was a contractual nightmare and waste of time. And of course, the lawyers didn't understand the use cases and vice versa. And so I think if the world becomes much more sensible and GDPR forms a general part of a normal contract, then that will be brilliant. In terms of the ugly, different industry, but I'm a director of a series of schools, an academy school in Birmingham, and the amount of money that people like schools to try and make sure they're GDPR compliant is a bit of a scandal, and is not what the legislation is there to do. And so I think some confines around the legislation to make it sensible for multiplicities of use cases like schools would be really sensible. It's created a level of bureaucracy on I think organizations and institutions.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. In some ways, it's like a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, 100%, like we heard earlier on panels today. So traveling abroad on a plane and verifying, are you COVID-free, etc. That's very, very different from getting into other places and doing other things. So, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, John. And Christoforos, this is it.
So I'll be
now, and I will give you 2 minutes, I promise.
I get that. So I'll be a bit unconventional in what I'm saying here. For me, the good one would definitely be the design of the privacy by design methodology. So working with many software development and application development companies, I believe that it helps massively the sector.